Welcome to the Ascension Path with Twin Essence. I'm Lacey.
And I'm Marley, and we're your Starseed Lightworker and Psychic Medium hosts.
We're identical twins with spiritual abilities and Starseed missions on Earth. On the Ascension Path, we discuss what it's like to be identical twins serving in a spiritual capacity and provide insights into our work as Starseeds. We create a sacred space to receive channeled messages, intuitive teachings, and expansive conversations that elevate your frequency and support your evolution. Join us to learn about navigating the path to Ascension and becoming the most authentic, aligned version of you. Take what resonates and leave the rest. We are digging into Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day movie. All of the topics, the themes, and the collective messages that were shoved into this cinematic masterpiece, if you will. So, if you have not watched Disclosure Day yet, please stop right now, go watch it, come back, and take a listen to this, because you are going to be floored by the transmission you receive from watching it and the transmissions we share today, because it's all connected and it's all related. We were so nervous to go see this movie because we had heard about it coming out and we knew that Spielberg was creating one. And we were so nervous it was going to end up being one of those like Hollywood thriller horror movies where everybody leaves with the typical programmed response of being terrified of these beings coming to Earth. And we were pleasantly surprised that it wasn't. It was actually a very integrated perspective and story that we feel really speaks to where the collective is moving in this ascension process. We were so emotional during the film. It's very important to us. The messaging, the story's important, and it really resonated with us. And I'll just add, this is the second time we've recorded this episode. The first time we recorded it, something went completely off with the audio. Kind of like Margaret, right? The news anchor speaking in the film and starting to click and almost glitching out, and then Daniel being able to interpret it later. Unfortunately, we don't have some amazing blue avian light language coming through like Margaret did. But we do feel like there was something going on with how things were being recorded and transmitted. We haven't been able to reproduce that error. And I think that they wanted us to come forward a second time, re-record, maybe bring through some different messages that weren't brought through in the initial recording. Honestly, it's the most bizarre thing we've ever had happen. We've never had a podcast do that before. When I pulled it up to edit, I was like, oh my God, what has happened? And it just like the audio was like cutting. I don't even know how to describe it. It just was like cutting out in a really weird way. Low key kind of wish that there was like a voice on the other end, like whispering or talking over us, because I feel like that would have been really, really cool. But clearly the frequency did something with the technology where the universe said, no, you must re-record this a second time, and this time add all this other stuff in. So here we are. We're bringing you Disclosure Day, breaking it down, and this time we trust the transmission will be clear. We were pleasantly surprised at how well they did in the film. We definitely were emotional during it. I mean, I know we definitely cried a lot during it. People probably thought something was wrong with us, but it was so important to us how they portrayed it and what it's doing for the collective. Yeah, we loved every minute of it. It was such a spiritual experience to go into a movie theater and actually watch it and experience it for the first time. And it felt transformational for the two of us. So I think we want to start by digging into some of the themes that came up for us while watching this movie. And these are like collective themes that we felt were messages for people that were sitting there and witnessing it. And so the first one I want to talk about is truth versus consequences. So this message stems from the scene with Daniel and Jane, his girlfriend, when he is sharing with her the information regarding disclosure and the evidence of extraterrestrials and the interaction between humans and extraterrestrials. And there's a dialogue between the two where Jane essentially asks Daniel, is the truth more important than the consequences? And it really covers this concept of traditional religion and values and beliefs versus non-traditional. And she gets really concerned about humanity looking at these beings as gods and then rejecting like traditional religious contexts and like the Bible and Jesus himself. And Daniel's perspective is that everyone has the right to know, and that it doesn't matter what the consequences of this information being leaked or shared is. They need to know. Everyone needs to know this. This is the truth. I think it's interesting. It's an interesting perspective and topic to bring into the collective conversation because it's something that I think many people debate to some level, especially as it relates to disclosure and extraterrestrials. I also think back to channeled messages Lacey and I have, which is that star beings do use the guise of gods and goddesses and deities to interact with cultures throughout time and humans throughout time. So it begs the question of star beings appearing to you in a form that you're comfortable with so that you are more receptive to their message and their presence. Yeah, I think they explored this concept very, very well because there was even a part of the movie where Jane talks to a nun and she asks her about, do you think it's possible these beings exist outside of like Earth and humanity on Earth? And she kind of says it in a way of, why would God create all of this just for us? Like, why isn't it possible that there's more than us out there? And this concept that humans think they're the superior race on Earth, but that doesn't mean there aren't things that are more powerful or have different technologies and abilities than us that aren't Earth based. I think it's just an incredible exploration of that topic. And this context that it kind of touches on is also the matrix programming of the fear of what would happen to the collective if they're no longer following the Bible or a traditional religious belief system. Or even the fear that maybe the Bible and the traditional belief system comes from something that they didn't think it came from, right? Maybe it was created or originating from somewhere else. Yeah, the potential of like non-human existence and creation of the things that humanity is actually using and believing in, that concept of that was just great. And I thought they covered it so well though. Like even for someone who might really struggle with accepting the existence of these beings and life outside of Earth, I think they covered it really well of how you could view it from a religious context, but also be accepting of it and non-judgmental and not rigid and scared of it. I think it's again that integrated perspective that Spielberg used throughout the story in this. Like you said, Lacey, you can view it from the religious side and still see it that way, or you can view it outside of religion and see it this way. Either way, it's still a truth. And also, it goes back to what Lacey and I have said about multiple truths existing. You can hold multiple truths. So you can still believe in a God, and it can still be true that there are other races outside of Earth that we can interact with, and that there's more to Earth to experience than just what we see. Absolutely, and they did a great job with this. I think covering the truth as something that everyone deserves and has access to versus let's shrink away in fear because it's different from what we've always known. And
Mhm.
the duality of that was like, ugh, so great to watch.
Mhm.
The other theme, and we kind of alluded to it already, just talking about the truth versus consequences topic, but it's the concept that star beings or extraterrestrials are coming to humans and making contact in a form that they are most comfortable with. So this is something Lacey and I have always channeled and talked about, right? In respect to gods and goddesses and ancient civilizations and how star beings would visit them, masked as gods. The same thing can be said, though, as it was depicted in the film with the animals, right? There was the interaction with the cardinal and Margaret when this had kind of kicked off her maybe awakening, I'll call it. And the same thing with Daniel growing up and having experiences with animals where they can just kind of look into the eyes, they can communicate, they can make that contact. And it really shows you how star beings, extraterrestrials, whatever term you want to use,
may already be in contact with you more than you think.
Yes, this concept that they take these familiar forms to create a comfortable, easy experience for humans that they're in contact with was honestly the truth. At least from our experiences, I would say it's probably the truth. But I think that you see one of the characters, Daniel, you see him talk about a fox and different animals and being able to communicate with them. And then you see Margaret talking about seeing animals, but being a little more like scared of it and never wanting to tell anyone about her experiences with these animals. And then the cardinal obviously comes, and that's kind of like her, I guess, like her initiation into her awakening, I want to call it.
But
But
all of us know that experience with spirit, right? Anybody who's going through that awakening or has had some kind of unexplained experience knows what it's like to see those signs and symbols from spirit and see those animals that show up oftentimes as a symbol, and it's right in that realm.
and it's not completely far off. I mean, Marley and I obviously had our Starseed awakenings with these beings, and they appeared as themselves to us. But we were already at a certain point in our journey where we weren't going to freak out seeing them in their real energetic form. But for someone else who might be more scared of that, they might appear as an animal. And it even reminds me of like a Nihal Starseed might see a rabbit
Mhm.
as a symbol.
Sirians might see an ocean animal, like Mintakans. I often associate them with dolphins. Um,
Cygnus Starseeds might see the swan.
yes.
So, like, there are animal depictions that can sometimes represent these beings. And I think that this concept of these beings using animals to take form and to communicate with humanity was spot on in the film.
And it introduced a topic, I think, into the spiritual realm that so many healers, mediums maybe aren't talking about, which is the idea that star beings are part of spirit, right? Like Lacey and I always say spirit as this kind of collective term encompassing like all guides we might be speaking with or communicating with. And your star family is part of that. So I feel like it integrated that perspective as well into the story of like, yeah, you can see a cardinal, and that could be your ancestor who's passed or your loved one who's passed, but that cardinal can also be your star family communicating with you too. They're not different.
No,
They're one and the same.
no, they're one and the same. I think that's a great example of it. And then they also started leading into what we would call like repressed childhood memories throughout the film.
Or abductions.
Yes, and this was really, really interesting how they covered it because Daniel and Margaret are like the main characters that you're following throughout the film, and they have these moments where you see breadcrumbs of what they might remember from their childhood that might be an indicator of something that's occurring right now with their mission. And later on, we'll see them travel back into a childhood memory that they both share together, where you find out more information about their connection and relationship to these beings, but it was really, really scary, and there was a lot of fear surrounding it for Margaret in particular to do it.
And it always comes through as like this dream state experience or this astral realm experience, which obviously Lacey and I are very familiar with, right? That's what our first experience with star beings was. We had those lucid dream experiences. So I think it's very fitting that they kind of kept that repressed memory, dream state, abduction type uh, concepts all woven in here. But Margaret sees it in this dream state, and she really doesn't want to. She feels like it's a nightmare, it's a memory she doesn't want to go back to for whatever reason. But it shows up to her as like a Hansel and Gretel like cottage or cabin, whatever you want to call it, in this dream state, which is something that I think is a very interesting and intentional choice to make in telling this story. Because there are people that Lacey and I know of and ourselves who have experiences from our childhood with these like fairy tale fantasy type dreams that I do believe are closely connected to our interaction with our star families and star beings in the astral realm.
It does remind me of the gingerbread house. And when I say the gingerbread house, I mean, she talks about it as Hansel and Gretel in the film. But for Marley and I, we would talk about things as the gingerbread house, or I should say, Marley talked about the gingerbread man. And before I go into that memory, I was going to say that in that memory with Margaret, these beings appeared as like deer, and they were
Mhm.
taking her to the Hansel and Gretel house. And so it was that level of this is what's going to make a child comfortable and at ease. So we're going to make everything appear that way. And then her human brain is going to remember it that way because we know from all the abduction experiences that people tell, a lot of people tell abduction experiences from a very fear based, scary, scary place because their human mind can't make sense of what happened, but that's not always the reality of what happened. And you can do regressions and hypnosis sessions to actually learn what really happened from a more neutral state.
I'll add too that the programming is what makes her and anybody else usually place these memories into that fear state too. So it's like the programming is what makes her think, I don't want to go back to that night. That was a nightmare. That wasn't a good dream. That was a nightmare. I don't want to go back there because the human part of our brain can't understand it. So the program makes her understand it as unknown equals fear, right? Lack of control equals fear.
And it's like, I made that all up. It was a dream. I was just a child. So there's like a complete discount and
Mhm.
ownership over the experience and the memory. And it's like, I was just imaginative and dreamed it. And people would think I'm crazy if it was actually real and why I remember it that way.
Versus the reality of the experience was it which was, "Hey, I'm seeing a lot of cool animals, I'm seeing this house, I'm following my intuition and going with it. Nothing actually bad happened there. I was making contact with entities,
But that's
extraterrestrials."
But that is the true Matrix programming, making you turn it all off, pretend it never happened, ignore it because it's bad if you trust it.
Absolutely. Like Lacey alluded to already, like, there are memories I have from my childhood where I went through a period of time having, like, nightmares or night terrors, I will call them, where it I refer to it as the gingerbread man. And this is something I haven't even completely explored yet on my own path or with my own hypnosis and regression. But essentially, I would have these, violent thrashing dreams where I always describe it as my life would flash before my eyes. I would see these quick flashes of scenes and it was very bright. And I describe it as like memories or like I don't even know what it was, but throughout all those flashes, there would be a gingerbread man, like a distorted gingerbread man. And so I would get really upset as a kid and I'd be crying and like I would just be like, the gingerbread man, the gingerbread man. And it kind of went on for like, I don't know if it was like a week or a couple weeks, but this was in like first or second grade that this happened to me. And I do definitely connect those like night terrors, so to speak, that I had to contact with my star family.
Yeah, and I remember when she used to have these nightmares,
We
we
shared a
couldn't.
room.
Yes, so of course I would be awoken by it. But the whole point is she could never describe what was happening as we were kids. Like, I didn't understand it. I would be like, I don't get it. Like, you don't like the gingerbread man? And
Well,
like,
I think that's what's crazy too is like I thought gingerbread men were cool. Like I like Shrek. I was like, Ginge is a cool character in Shrek, you know?
well, so I grew up loving gingerbread and gingerbread houses. But Marley had these nightmares, this period of time she went through when we were kids where it was like these night terrors. And she couldn't describe anything other than it's the gingerbread man, and she would sob and she would freak out. And I didn't understand it. I was like, why is the gingerbread man scary? I love the gingerbread man. Because we used to have a children's book that was about it as well. And I grew up being very into gingerbread. Like even during the holiday season, like that was one of my aesthetics of choice. Like I would buy gingerbread ornaments and things, and I liked the theme, the tree around gingerbread. I liked to eat gingerbread. No one in my family liked it. They were like, "You're such a weird child. Nobody here likes that. We're not making them." So I could never get gingerbread cookies unless I went out and bought them. So it's just like an interesting dynamic because Marley had this period of time having these night terrors, and then I was like the kid that was like, "I love gingerbread and they're amazing." And so I don't know if there's any correlation there, but it is peculiar, especially after watching this film. The two of us were like, this feels like something to dig into.
Yeah, and I will just add to, like, after seeing the film, and obviously I can quite literally connect my gingerbread experiences to that experience that Margaret was having in the film. and I know there's something there to explore. It was right before we had left for Croatia, and on the flight to Croatia, I was sitting next to, like, a business guy. He had pulled out his headphone case, he puts his headphones in, he zips the case back up, and on the keychain is a gingerbread man. And I was like, first of all, what are the odds of that? It's like a grown ass man who's got like why would he have a gingerbread keychain? But I was like, all right, I see you. Message received, Star Family. This is something that we need to dig into further.
Yes. So definitely something to look at, but an interesting depiction of these star beings communicating with children.
In synchronicity, I'd say. We also had experiences growing up that I think we can kind of reflect back on as kids. When we would go to our family's cabin, and there was a time where we were very, very little. I don't even have memory of this. Lacey usually remembers a lot more than me, where our mom and grandma had got us up in the middle of the night to watch the northern lights on the lake.
Mm.
And I don't have the memory of this, Lacey, but do you want to share what you saw?
My mom had gone and got the two of us up, and it was just us with our mom and our grandma. And she's like, there are northern lights outside. Like, this has never happened before. And in northern Wisconsin, I'm don't think it's that common to get northern lights. Maybe it is, but we've grown up going there for years, our whole lives, and I've never seen northern
But we
lights.
still haven't, Lacey. It's not that common.
Yes,
Like,
it's not that common, but I think there are some that might be like, "Well, I've seen them several times up there." There's some
I'm
people,
sure there are some, but not for us.
but we did not. So she got us up in the middle of the night and she's like, "There are northern lights outside." And my only memory of this is getting up in the middle of the night, and I remember laying on the floor in front of like a patio door to look out over the lake. And that's my memory. I don't actually remember what the lights looked like until this day when we talked to our mom. She's like, "I can't believe you don't remember what these lights looked like, girls. They were, like, flickering and moving around and flashing," and I was like,
That's
"Oh,
not the
cool.
Northern Lights.
No, no," but I was like, "Oh, okay, but I don't remember it," and then as we were talking about this episode, and we had just watched Missing 411 UAP documentary on Stream Beacon TV, and there were people on there talking about being at a lake and watching this light move and flicker. I was like, "Marley, I'm pretty sure we never saw the Northern Lights. Like, I'm pretty sure that was not the Northern Lights." And we have no recollection of this, but our mom does. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was contact with the star being, potential UFO UAP situation.
It seems the most likely scenario there.
Because it's flickering lights in the sky are not what the Northern Lights are. Like, everybody
Mhm.
knows they move, they glow, they're like a watercolor painting.
Yeah, I mean, somebody can debunk this right now, but I don't think I've ever seen Northern Lights described as that.
I did not talk to my parents, or family before this to ask them about that memory again, but I'm gonna have to, and I will be suggesting that this is a UFO situation. They'll be like, "No, it's not."
Like all of them end up being. The other theme I wanna bring through or talk a little bit about is how this story and the film depicted extraterrestrials or star beings in this, like, humanized form. And I'm not talking about, like, literally their physical form, I'm talking about the fact that they showed humans having empathy for these beings when people saw the footage of the craft crashes, of experiments from humans on them. And I think that that was something very important to the film because it totally switches people out of a place of fear and places them into a state of empathy and identity with these beings.
Yeah, the humanization of these beings and the way they close the gap between seeing them as outsiders to us was phenomenally done. Like, I don't know how anyone could watch this film and not think, actually, maybe there's nothing wrong with these beings, and maybe there isn't something to be afraid of. But again, that depends on how much 3D programming someone has.
Mhm.
But this concept of these beings being taken from like traumatic crash sites and events, and then they're being experimented on and it's against their will, and there's pain and there's a dehumanization of their animals and creatures, and they're not living beings that are respected because we don't understand them. I think that was really hard to watch. Like, it was emotional, and it showed that these are real living creatures, and just like any other living thing or animal, they're not that separate from us. And
Mhm.
just because you don't understand them and don't understand it or don't know a lot about it doesn't mean that you have to be afraid of it. I also think like the humanization of there being a traumatic event like a crash, and then like people go in and they're like collecting the bodies, and they're taking the beings that survived to experiment on. Like, can you imagine if humans were doing that to each other? Like, it would never be okay. So I think seeing that almost depiction of something like this in a human way was really moving, and it really got the point across to the viewer that maybe these beings aren't so different from you.
Mhm. Because the reality is we wouldn't treat humans that way. A reasonable person wouldn't. We wouldn't treat animals that way reasonably, so why are we acting like we would treat extraterrestrials that way? And why would that be okay?
Absolutely. One other theme I wanted to touch on was this like cosmic technology they covered in the film. And there was like this weird black metal bar thing that kept getting referred to throughout the film with I'm gonna say the villain. I can't think of the name, but like the villain, and how he was like using it to control humans, but it was also very dangerous. Everyone was like, "Don't touch it. It's gonna harm you. You're gonna get like zapped out of this reality." And that black bar was also used not just for controlling people and for negative, more ill-intentioned purposes, but then later you see Margaret use it to help them and help their case and give power and electricity where it's needed, and cloak them when they needed it. So I think this concept of cosmic technology and that these beings are carrying far more advanced intelligence than we realize was also a subtle theme throughout the film.
Absolutely. And it ties into how technology can be used with intention, right? So I think of it as like spiritual technology, whether it's like tarot cards, oracle cards, like different divination tools, right? And intention is so important when you use those. The same thing could be said in the film with this black bar, right? You see it being used differently depending on who the person is and what their intention is. And it goes back to topics Lacey and I always talk about, which is technology in service of divinity. When you have the right intention, I think, behind a piece of technology, the sky is the limit to what you can achieve.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show you how, like you said, intention's everything, and it can be used for positive and it can be used for negative. So which one are you going to use it for? And we don't do a ton of channeling on like cosmic technology. So for us,
Mhm.
that was kind of a newer. I know there are other people out there that might be like, I've seen this or they've shown me this, I've channeled this. For us, we've never really channeled on technology. So that was kind of a newer concept for the two of us.
Yeah.
And then I want to dig into some of the gaps now.
Mhm.
So, what was not covered in the film? And the first thing I will say is when you actually finally see these beings, because it's alluded to throughout the whole film, when you actually get your eyes on these beings, they all look like Zetas or the Greys.
Mhm. Yeah, humanoid gray form, stereotypical extraterrestrial, which makes sense, I think, for like a collective disclosure film. You want to stick with what people know because people already identify with the grays or the zetas physically, right? That's what they associate with extraterrestrials. But the gap in the film and what it didn't cover, and I think this would be way too much to cover in that story, don't get me wrong, is that the Greys aren't the only one, right? We know there are more types of star beings or extraterrestrials out there than just the Zetas or the Greys. So I think that that is one gap the film doesn't connect to. Maybe it's something that will be touched on in the future, but we know from our experience, and if you're listening, you should probably know this as well. There's many more types out there that take on different forms.
Can you literally imagine if Steven Spielberg was like, and now I'm going to put a blue avian in, I'm going to put a Lyran in, like, put
Yeah. You need to have continuity. People need to recognize the one thing.
people would be like, "What is going on? There's more than one," like, people who can't accept the fact that there's even extraterrestrials would be like, "Now there's more than one of them. What are these beings?" And honestly, it would have diluted the message and made the movie probably really cheesy if they actually put
Mhm,
that in.
mhm,
So, I think that it was a great introduction to disclosure as a whole and this concept of the truth and what we've always known and the infinites of the universe, but in a way that people can accept that's not going to draw their attention and focus elsewhere other than the fact that these exist and let's not always be afraid of it.
The other gap I think that we should talk about is this connection to these beings of creation versus implantation. That's what I call it. So in this dream state that Daniel and Margaret revisit, right, going to that Hansel and Gretel house, they essentially recover this memory of interacting with their star families, and they end up being like implanted, or at least that's what I feel it's alluding to, is the implantation of their gifts for this mission that they are serving on Earth. So Daniel being implanted with his gifts and Margaret being implanted with hers, and as they work, and they work together in this mission on Earth. And the movie does not touch on the fact that we're not just sitting here getting abducted, getting implanted with missions, getting implanted with gifts by these beings. We are created by them. We are one and the same with them.
Absolutely. And the exploration of humanity's relationship to the extraterrestrial beings or the star beings that are in this film is kind of like a big question mark. We know that Margaret and Daniel, by the end of it, we know that the two of them were implanted with these gifts from these beings and they've known them since they were children. But we don't know like their relationship to society, humanity as a whole. And obviously from the work that Marley and I do, we know that we come from these beings. Like they created Earth, they created us. We're all a seed and a mere fraction of source itself, which created these beings and created all of us. So I think that it's depicted very well in the film, and obviously it could not cover this concept because,
Mhm.
like I said earlier, if you can't even wrap your brain around these beings existing, like how would you wrap your brain around the fact that they created us?
Mhm.
Like that would get into that would glitch the matrix real quick, right, for a lot of people in their belief systems. So, I thought it was interesting the way they depicted it as, like, them being chosen and implanted with the gifts versus we're all born from them and they came to Earth as humans in this form and lifetime.
Mhm. And I always say too, it's not that we're being implanted with the gift and the mission. We are the gift, right? We're the creation, we're the gift on Earth.
I'm not saying it's not possible, but for the most part, like, we all know our missions when we're born, whether we're aware of it or not, whether it's conscious or unconscious. Most of the time, due to the veil of forgetfulness, we aren't always conscious of that until later in life. Like, you might have experiences where you, as a child, were being, I don't know what to call it. Like, I don't want to say abducted, I don't want to say probed or sampled, but like maybe you were implanted with something, but that doesn't mean that you didn't have these gifts to begin with.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean you weren't born with something from them,
I
because we all
mean,
came from them.
honestly, we have to grow up learning to walk, learning to talk, learning to do every skill that we end up doing as an adult. So is it so hard to believe that there's other things in you that you're just learning to tap into or unlock, or you haven't learned yet?
Yeah, it's true. So, getting into the final messages, I want to talk about this concept of disclosure day. So, is there one disclosure day that is going to happen for the collective that changes the game for the whole world, where everyone's going to say, oh my God, these beings are real and now the truth has been disclosed? Marley?
No. I mean, it's an easy answer for Lacey and I that, the film does a great job showing all this, but do I believe there's one day that something like this will happen? No, I don't believe that because I believe that the collective ascension process shows already, evidence shows that we are letting disclosure trickle in. Little by little, disclosure trickles in, and we continue to evolve as a collective until it becomes undeniable, right? That's why we see things being declassified now. That's why we see more people awakening now. That is because we are evolving as a collective and is happening little by little over time until it's undeniable to us as humans on Earth.
This concept that there's only going to be one day and one event that brings the truth out is just not possible because we already have seen things being disclosed. Like, we know there are files and evidence being declassified. We know there are people who have experiences with these beings and communicate with them. We know there are UFO and UAP sightings. It's been happening all along. Like, none of this is new. And this concept that we're gonna release everything that we know on one day so that the public fully knows everything. Like, it's been happening for years, whether you were aware of it or not. So maybe for some people, it's disclosure day, the day that you like finally find out everything or are aware of it. But for a lot of the collective, like, this isn't new. Like, we don't need one event to make us believe.
Mhm. And you hear so much talk online about controlled disclosure, right? And to some extent, that might be true to some extent. But my question for all of you to reflect on is how much say do you think you have in it? Do you think that this is something that you're voluntarily choosing, or do you think it's going to be involuntary? I think that where we are going as a collective, it's something that will slowly creep into your focus until it's just there, and you can only deny it so long before it's right there in front of you.
It's like our pet peeve is controlled disclosure discussions.
Controlled by who? That's what I always say, controlled by who? Because you're the one deciding what you wanna believe and what you wanna give your energy to.
Yeah, it's a very, like, outsourced belief system that someone's controlling everything for you. Like, okay, if you wanna stay in victimhood and believe that you're a victim who's unaware and being controlled by things, like, that's the reality you create. So, no, in my reality, things aren't being controlled. Not at all.
Yeah, so what do you choose? That's the question.
Then
W
we dig into the missions, right?
Yes, the missions. We have to talk about the missions between Daniel and Margaret. Daniel being that he can hear this frequency that Margaret is clicking through, and he can understand it and translate it. He even writes it, and it looks like mathematical equations, right? And this is something that he has had as a gift his whole life. Whereas Margaret on the other side, she is speaking it, but she's feeling everything through humanity. And so we have the translation of what the beings need to be shared, and then we have the person who can bridge between the message and the people to receive it.
It's such an interesting concept of the two people that are needed with these missions to make Disclosure Day happen. And it was not lost on us that there were two, not one.
Mhm,
Because as we know in our Ascension work, it's a very unique incarnation when there are two of us meant to hold this mission and carry it forward.
mhm.
Um, in a weird way, watching this movie felt a little bit like watching our life's work.
A version of it, right? Definitely a version of it, which is probably why I think it's part of the reason it was so, emotional too, because Lacey and I can just connect to our dharma and our mission, and just that alone will get us emotional because we believe so fully and completely in it, and we can feel that. But it was a special moment to see how that played out in this story, and I thought it was a really great way to tell the story and to even have supporting characters, right? Like, Hugo was a supporting character in this, and that all these people, like, they knew about the players in the game, but they didn't know exactly how everything would work out, which is oftentimes how it feels like when you're moving in alignment on your path intuitively. It's like you don't have all the answers, but you just move, right? And so seeing that unfold with the other characters like Hugo being like, it's Daniel and it's Margaret, and we need them together, and we need them at this location in order to do this, and this is what will work. And I loved seeing all the players involved for this to come true.
Absolutely. And sometimes in a weird way, we both were like, Marley is Margaret and I'm Daniel in a weird way.
Mhm.
We were like, there are elements of that in our own journey, even though we both do like a blended
Yeah.
form of it. But anybody who has worked with us knows we channel different and communicate with star beings a little bit differently. So even though we're twins, that doesn't mean we do everything the same way. That'd be really boring and honestly
not really realistic. No, as they told us years ago, that would be boring if you do the same thing as twins.
Yes.
But, it really caused us to reflect on our mission and reflect on disclosure. And this concept of what Lacey and I do, where we're activating humanity's remembrance. The work that we do, I feel, is what happens beyond disclosure. If you find Lacey and I, you find us because you don't need us to prove that something is real or something exists. You already know it. You feel it. It might be unexplained, but it's there. Energetically, it's in your field. And it's how we take that one step further to activating your remembrance of our creation by star beings.
And by the end of the film, we know that the film only covers Disclosure Day, so this great truth being disclosed. It does not cover what happens next. Like, what do we do with this information? How does it impact humanity? What is the relationship between these beings and humanity itself? What now? Like, what does it mean? And through Twin Essence, like, our work really is the what's next. Our work isn't about Disclosure Day itself. Our work is about activating remembrance. It's about connecting you to your mission and purpose for women that feel that call, and it's about bridging that 3D to 5D ascension pathway. So that's really the what's next.
So when the movie ends and they say, listen, we say, remember.